When the drought hit Cedar Ridge, everyone pretended to be a hero. Lawn sign campaigns about saving every drop, water usage trackers in the town app, and the HOA president's smug smile on the local news. But for Daniel Mercer, that summer didn't start with heroism. It started with a hollow echo in the deep end of his drained swimming pool. He stood there one June morning, coffee in hand, staring at the cracked blue basin that used to shimmer with reflected sunlight. The faint smell of chlorine mixed with dust. And a single white tag fluttered from the metal handrail. HOA Water Conservation Compliance. Mandatory drain order. The ink bled slightly where sprinkler mist had hit it. Though no sprinkler of his had run in weeks, Daniel's first thought wasn't anger. It was disbelief. He had spent half his life building this property, a quiet acre on the far edge of the HOA boundary, near the tree line and the old municipal well that had supplied water to this valley long before there was ever a board, a president, or a single overpriced villa. That well was personal. His grandfather had drilled it in 1968, back when Cedar Ridge was just farmland. Daniel still had the deed to it. The mineral and water rights signed in black ink, older than most of his neighbors. But none of that seemed to matter to Gloria Wren, the HOA president, whose latest crusade involved proving to the mayor that her community had achieved zero waste water consumption. Her plan, unveiled in glossy PowerPoints and smug neighborhood meetings, was simple. Every pool must be drained to preserve groundwater levels. The thing was, Daniel's pool wasn't connected to city water. It never had been. He'd filled it every year using the well on his own land, the same underground source that, unbeknownst to most, still fed half the town's municipal supply through an aging network of pipes that snaked beneath Cedar Ridge. His grandfather's deal with the county, decades ago, had allowed them to tap into that system in exchange for tax credits and maintenance fees. Daniel had simply inherited both the land and the contract, so when he saw the dry basin, the guilt campaign posters stapled to his mailbox, and the violation notice tacked onto his front gate, a slow burn started in his chest. That night, he walked down to the old pump house behind the orchard, flashlight cutting through the warm darkness. The machinery hummed quietly, steady, healthy. A bronze tag still read, "Property of Mercer Estate, registered private well, R17A." He crouched, tracing the engraved serial number with his finger. Everything was exactly as his grandfather had left it. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through the HOA's latest emails. One subject line blinked like a taunt. Urgent. Cedar Ridge Community Pool Drainage Success. Inside the message were photos, his pool among them bone dry. Gloria's caption read, "Every household must do its part for sustainability." There were hashtags, applause emojis, even comments praising her leadership. Daniel leaned against the pump, jaw tightening. "You want sustainability?" he muttered. "Let's talk about who actually owns the water." The next morning, he attended the HOA meeting in the clubhouse, a beige-walled room that smelled faintly of coffee and ego. Rows of residents murmured while Gloria stood at the podium in her signature coral blazer, projecting confidence. "Thanks to everyone for your cooperation," she chirped. "We've reduced total water use by 22% this quarter. Cedar Ridge is officially a drought-friendly community." A smattering of polite applause filled the room. Daniel waited until the noise faded, then raised his hand. "Yes, Mr. Mercer?" He stood, papers in hand. "You drained my pool." Gloria blinked, the smile tightening. "We drained every pool, Daniel. It's for the good of the community. Except mine isn't community water," he said evenly. "It's fed from a private well." "You knew that." She clasped her clipboard like a shield. "All water sources affect the same groundwater table. It's still within our jurisdiction." Daniel set the papers down on the nearest table, photocopies of the original well rights, stamped by the county registrar. "No, it isn't! You overstepped!" A low murmur spread through the crowd. People shifted, glancing between them. Gloria's cheeks flushed. "The board acted under emergency provisions," she snapped. "The drought." "There's no drought in my well," Daniel interrupted quietly. "And you don't get to touch private property, especially not one that your town literally depends on." That last sentence made her flinch. She didn't understand yet, not really, but she would. Over the following week, Daniel started digging through decades of paperwork, county filings, service contracts, old letters between his grandfather and the municipal council. What he found shocked even him. A signed 1971 amendment that effectively granted the Mercer well as a primary auxiliary source for Cedar Ridge's water grid. In exchange, the family retained full control over usage and maintenance. The county could draw from it, but only with their permission. That meant, technically, every drop Gloria's HOA bragged about conserving still originated from his property. He spent nights scanning documents, highlighting key lines and organizing evidence. The more he read, the clearer it became. Gloria hadn't just drained his pool, she had violated property law, overstepped municipal boundaries, and interfered with a private utility. By Friday, Daniel drove to the county records office, where an aging clerk named Marla remembered his grandfather. When he showed her the papers, she whistled softly. "Well, I'll be," she said. "You're telling me the HOA drained water that technically belongs to your registered well?" "That's a mess waiting to explode," Daniel smiled faintly. "Then let's make it official." Marla helped him notarize a fresh copy of the well ownership documents. She also pointed him to the county's new water management portal, an online system tracking every gallon distributed to Cedar Ridge. The moment Daniel logged in, his eyebrows shot up. Nearly 45% of the town's supply came through Well 17A, his well. And yet he hadn't received a single maintenance payment in 5 years. Someone was siphoning water from his property and claiming conservation credit for it. That weekend, the HOA held their sustainability celebration at the community park, a catered event complete with banners reading, "Together we save." Daniel showed up quietly, wearing jeans and a sun-bleached baseball cap. He walked past tables piled with brochures about responsible water use and paused near the refreshment tent where Gloria chatted with the mayor. When she noticed him, her smile faltered. "Daniel, didn't expect you here." "Just supporting the cause," he said lightly, eyes flicking to the massive tank of lemonade chilling in ice. "Plenty of water to go around, I see." She stiffened. "It's for guests. Moderation, of course." He nodded, then leaned closer. "You might want to moderate your paperwork, too. County's curious where all their payments went." Before she could respond, he walked off, leaving her frozen mid-sentence. That night, he sent an email to the HOA board, the County Water Authority, and the mayor's office. Subject line: unauthorized water diversion from private well to 17A. Attached were scans of the original deed, maps, and a breakdown of how the HOA's conservation had actually redirected flow lines through illegal valve adjustments. The email went viral within the local network. By Monday morning, Daniel's phone wouldn't stop ringing, reporters, inspectors, lawyers. And when a county truck rolled up to his property, the inspectors found exactly what he described: new piping installed behind his fence, connecting directly to the HOA's irrigation system. The report that followed used words like tampering, misappropriation, and civil liability. Gloria tried to spin it, calling it a miscommunication, but the county wasn't buying it. They froze all HOA water access pending investigation, meaning every manicured lawn in Cedar Ridge began to turn yellow within days. Daniel's property, however, remained lush and green. His orchard thrived, his sprinklers hissed softly in the morning light, and his drained pool stood like a quiet monument to the storm that was just beginning. He didn't celebrate. Not yet. He knew the HOA would come for him harder now. He'd humiliated them publicly and exposed their lies. But as he sat on his porch watching the sunset shimmer across the dry rooftops beyond his fence, he whispered, almost amused, "You drained my pool. Let's see how you like being drained next." The following Monday, the HOA office at Cedar Ridge looked like a crime scene made of paperwork. Folders sprawled across tables, phones ringing nonstop, and Gloria Wren pacing like a trapped cat. Outside, sprinklers lay still, flower beds brittle under the heat wave that was supposed to prove her greatness. Instead, it exposed her blunder. Daniel Mercer watched the chaos from his truck, parked just across the street beneath the faded elm that had shaded his grandfather's first drilling rig half a century ago. He'd come not to gloat but to confirm a suspicion. When the county shut off the HOA's unauthorized valves, someone had tried to reconnect them overnight. He'd seen muddy footprints near his fence. Whoever it was had used bolt cutters and desperation. That morning, he'd also received an email from the county's environmental department. Formal investigation opened. Please be available for site inspection and testimony. The tone was bureaucratic, but the subtext was victory. The next day, Daniel met Inspector Rhonda Bell, a woman in her 40s with sun-creased eyes and a clipboard she wielded like a weapon. She stepped out of her truck, looked at the gleaming well house, and said, "So this is the famous number 17A. Half the town's baths owe you a thank you." Daniel chuckled. They owe me about 6 years of maintenance payments, actually. Rhonda crouched by the valve, tracing the new PVC line the HOA had installed. You realize this is textbook tampering? Private utility line, no permit, no easement. I realize, he said. And I also realize someone's been hiding records. Rhonda nodded, snapping photos. We'll subpoena the HOA's invoices. You just keep everything exactly how it is. Don't touch a single bolt. He watched as she sealed the site with yellow tape. The sound of the fluttering plastic in the dry wind felt like justice announcing itself. That evening, while Daniel grilled dinner on his porch, a black SUV rolled up his driveway. The driver's window slid down, revealing Gloria's familiar coral blazer. She didn't even try to smile. You think this little stunt of yours helps anyone? She said through the glass. Depends on who you mean by anyone. You're ruining property values. Reporters are calling. Do you know how bad this makes Cedar Ridge look? Like a community that steals water from its own residents? He offered, her knuckles whitened around the steering wheel. Be careful, Daniel. You don't understand how these things work. I understand exactly, he said, setting his tongs down. You drained my pool to make yourself look like a savior. Turns out you were stealing the water that kept your lawns alive. Enjoy the drought. She drove off without another word, tires spitting gravel. Within a week, local news stations had picked up the story. The headline was pure clickbait. Homeowner exposes HOA water theft in drought-stricken county. Cameras showed dry lawns, angry residents, and Daniel standing beside his humming well pump. Calm and deliberate. He didn't grandstand. He simply held up the documents proving ownership. The footage went viral overnight. The HOA board panicked. 3 members resigned. The remaining ones issued a formal statement blaming procedural confusion and promising internal review. But Daniel knew the language of cowards. It was the same as admission. Then came the subpoena. County investigators demanded full accounting records from the HOA's water expenditures. What they uncovered wasn't just negligence, it was fraud. Over 4 years, Gloria had billed residents thousands in sustainability fees, supposedly for installing rainwater tanks that never existed. Instead, she'd funneled the money into personal landscaping projects and PR contracts for her real estate business. When Rhonda called Daniel with the findings, she whistled softly. You might not just own the water, Mr. Mercer. You might own the headlines for the next month. Daniel didn't smile. I just want them accountable. You're getting more than that, she replied. You're getting court dates. The court summons arrived stamped and heavy. HOA v. Mercer, or technically Mercer v. Cedar Ridge Homeowners Association after his countersuit. His attorney, a wiry man named Eli Parker, loved cases like this. Eli met him in a small law office downtown filled with maps and coffee-stained contracts. This is straightforward, Eli said, flipping through the pages. They trespassed, stole a private resource, and falsified billing. We'll hit them for damages, unpaid royalties, and emotional distress. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Emotional distress? Trust me, Eli grinned. When they drained your pool, they drained your peace of mind. The trial drew half the county into the courthouse. Cameras flashed, microphones hovered, and Gloria arrived in designer sunglasses pretending not to see the protesters holding signs that read, Stop HOA Overreach, and Water Belongs to Everyone. Not the board. Inside, the tension was electric. The HOA's lawyer tried to argue that water under Daniel's land was community-connected, and therefore subject to regulation. Eli countered by producing the 1971 deed. This document, he said, tapping the paper so the microphone picked up the crisp sound, grants sole usage rights to the Mercer family, not partial, sole. The county draws from it by contract, but the HOA does not exist in that contract. Therefore, any interference constitutes theft. The judge, a tall woman with a calm but iron voice, looked over her glasses. Mr. Mercer, is it true this well currently supplies municipal water to half of Cedar Ridge? Yes, Your Honor. And the HOA drained your private pool under the guise of conservation? Yes, she nodded once sharply. Proceed. By midday, it was over. The evidence was overwhelming. When Rhonda took the stand and described the unauthorized piping, the courtroom fell silent except for the rustle of reporters' pens. Eli's closing words echoed through the room. They tried to dry up his water to fill their pride. The law doesn't run on ego, it runs on ownership. The verdict came a week later. Full restitution, public apology, and the dissolution of Cedar Ridge HOA's board-pending county oversight. But the fallout was bigger than anyone imagined. The county discovered that several nearby associations had copied Gloria's sustainability model, using similar unauthorized well connections. Overnight, inspectors were dispatched across the valley. Daniel became a reluctant folk hero, the man who turned the drought on its head. One evening after the verdict, he walked to his now empty pool. The county had offered to refill it, but he'd left it dry on purpose. The echo reminded him of how easily power can empty something meant for rest and reflection. He crouched, ran his fingers over the smooth tile, and whispered, "Grandpa, you were right. The land picks you." Behind him, the orchard shimmered under newly repaired sprinklers fed directly from the well. A thin rainbow arched through the mist. For the first time in months, Daniel smiled freely. But deep down, he knew this wasn't just a story about water. It was about control, and he'd just proven who truly held it. The weeks after the verdict felt strangely quiet. No more notices taped to Daniel Mercer's gate. No more smug emails about compliance or community responsibility. Cedar Ridge had gone from the county's most boastful HOA to a silent suburb where sprinklers stayed dry and whispers replaced gossip. For the first time in years, Daniel could hear the sound of his own property. The wind moving through the orchard leaves, the rhythmic heartbeat of the pump house, and the faint gurgle of the underground lines refilling their rightful path. But victory, he learned, didn't end at the courthouse doors. 3 days after the ruling, a thick envelope arrived from the County Water Commission. Inside were revised contracts and a personal letter from the commissioner himself. It read, "Mr. Mercer, we recognize your family's legacy in maintaining well 17A. The county wishes to reinstate your maintenance payments retroactively and offer you a position as a technical advisor for Cedar Ridge's future water projects." Daniel chuckled softly as he folded the letter. He never cared for titles or advisory roles, but the thought of sitting at the same table where Gloria once dictated compliance rules amused him more than he liked to admit. He poured himself coffee and walked out to the pool deck. The sun climbed over the ridge, painting the orchard gold. The empty pool reflected the sky like a mirror, calm, unbroken, almost waiting. That's when he decided it was time to fill it again. The refilling process became a small event in itself. Word spread fast. Neighbors brought lawn chairs to watch, as if witnessing the end of a drought and the start of something cleaner. Daniel opened the old brass valve on his well, hearing it groan softly before the water surged to life. The stream was clear and steady, carrying the scent of stone and thyme. Within hours, the pool began to shimmer again, sunlight rippling across its surface like it never left. A kid from down the street, one of the few who dared to talk to him during the HOA war, biked over and asked shyly, "Mr. Mercer, can we swim here when it's full?" Daniel grinned. "You bring your folks and you're all welcome. This place belongs to people who respect the water, not to those who steal it." Meanwhile, the fallout from the lawsuit deepened. Gloria Wren, once the Queen of Cedar Ridge, resigned publicly after being charged with property tampering and financial misconduct. Her manicured empire collapsed in weeks. Realtors withdrew listings, investors fled, and the once pristine neighborhood began showing cracks, literal ones, in its artificial perfection. Daniel didn't celebrate her fall. He'd seen too much to feel joy in someone else's ruin, but he did feel something like peace when he passed her now empty house one morning. Its "for sale" sign half torn by wind. He parked, walked up, and saw the dried-up flower beds she'd once flaunted in HOA newsletters. Then he noticed a small sprinkler valve sticking out of the ground, one of the illegal extensions that had stolen from his well. He knelt, twisted it loose, and tossed it into the trash. "That's the last drop you get from me," he muttered. A month later, Cedar Ridge called its first public meeting since the court case. The community center buzzed with tension, but it wasn't the same atmosphere as before. No podium arrogance, no forced applause, just tired homeowners ready for change. The county commissioner introduced Daniel at the microphone. "This man reminded us what responsibility really means," he said. "Not paperwork, not politics, and stewardship." Daniel stepped up, slightly uncomfortable under the fluorescent lights. He wasn't a public speaker. He was a man of soil, water, and truth. But he cleared his throat and began. "Most of you know me," he said, "and most of you thought I was stubborn. Maybe I am. But I didn't fight the HOA because I wanted to win. I fought because this land doesn't belong to rules written in boardrooms. It belongs to the people who listen when the ground talks back." A hush fell over the crowd. "I'm not asking for thanks," he continued. "Just remember, you can't fake conservation by draining what gives life. You protect it by understanding where it comes from." Applause broke slowly, then built. Not the forced kind, the real kind. After the meeting, a woman approached him, Claire Henderson, the widow of the man who'd helped his grandfather maintain the well decades ago. She handed him a folded, yellowed envelope. "I think this belonged to your grandfather," she said softly. "He gave it to my husband before he passed. Said it was for the right time." Inside was a handwritten note, faded but legible. "Daniel, if you ever need reminding, water only flows where there's truth. Keep it clean and it will never run dry." He read it twice, then tucked it into his wallet. The following spring, Cedar Ridge looked different. The lawns weren't unnaturally green anymore. People planted native shrubs and drought-resistant gardens. The HOA board was gone, replaced by a resident committee that operated transparently. Daniel's pool had become something else entirely, a symbol. Kids swam there on weekends. Retirees brought lemonade and stories, and sometimes reporters still came, asking for interviews about the man who owned the well that fed the town. He always gave the same answer. It wasn't about ownership. It was about respect. One evening, as twilight painted the sky orange, he sat by the water's edge, watching the reflection of his house ripple with the breeze. He could still remember the hollow sound of the empty pool months ago, how it had echoed his frustration. Now it sang differently. Full, alive, forgiving. The old pump hummed in the background, steady and strong, the same machine his grandfather had oiled by hand every summer. He smiled, hearing that rhythm, and whispered to himself, still flowing, "Pop, still ours." Then he turned off the porch light, leaned back in his chair, and let the night carry its quiet victory through the orchard. Because in Cedar Ridge, they might still talk about rules and regulations, but one truth had settled like stone at the bottom of a full pool. You can't drain what you don't own, and you can't silence the land when it decides to speak.